And we are sponsored in this tour through Makos by Shelley Zeitlin for his children Eli, Orit, and Ora, and L'Refu Shalema for Moshe Meir ben Esther Fradel. And we are sponsored by Eddie Chazan, L'Refu Shalema for Yedidya ben Penina, Shoshana Bas Penina, Simon Bas Rachel. We are also co-sponsored Lila Nishmas David ben Chaim, L'Refu Shalema for Eliyahu Moshe Mechai, sorry, Yaakov ben Basia, Leah, and the Schus of Abraham and Yom Ben Ishmael Malki Yehudis and family. We also, Irving asked us to please learn for Shana Rezel Bas Yisrael Dov and Tzvi Meir ben Elimelech. Their neshama should have an aliyah. We are holding 3 lines from the bottom of Daf Yud Testament Beis. We said yesterday an idea that the only time you're going to be chayiv for eating Meiser Sheni outside of Yerushalayim is only when it first entered in and then you took it out. If it never entered into Yerushalayim, then you're not chayiv for eating it outside of Yerushalayim. It was a big chiddush, which we learned from a pasuk. So now the Gemara asks 3 lines from the bottom of Daf Yud Testament Beis, Meisvei, Rabbi Yaisi Aimer, Rabbi Yaisi says, Kayin she'olsa biyadoi te'ena shel tevel. He has a fig of untied produce. Amar, and the Kayin says, he says, assigning different designations. Te'ena zu, this fig, trumasa ba'ukza. Its truma portion should be by its stem. Meiser Rishon b'tzvayna, its Meiser Rishon should be to its north. Or Meiser Sheni, which is the first, second, 4th, and 5th year of Shvi'ah cycle, is L'draima, if V'hishnas Meiser Sheni, if it's a year of Meiser Sheni. Or V'hu Yerushalayim, and he's in Yerushalayim. Or Meiser Ani, or he designates it Meiser Ani V'hu B'gvulin, if it's the 3rd and the 6th year, and he's outside of Yerushalayim. Achla, if he then proceeds to eat it, it's a problem, because he's eating the Meiser Rishon without the Trumas Meiser being removed. And before the Trumas Meiser is removed from the Meiser Rishon, it's tevel. So achla loike achas. V'zor she'achla, a non-kohen that eats it, like Ishtayim, because he's eating the tevel, because the Trumas Meiser wasn't removed from the Meiser Rishon, but it's also he's eating the Truma. If he eats the whole fig, remember it had by its stem Truma, and he gets Malkus for eating Truma. She'ilu b'tchila achla, if he would have eaten it without any designation, he would have only got 1 Malkus for eating tevel. Ilu b'tchila achla eino loike ela achas for eating tevel. Now, Taima de'isei b'Yerushalayim. The implication is that the reason why there's only 1 Malkus for the Kohen or 2 Malkus for the Yisrael is only because it's in Yerushalayim. So there's no problem of eating the Meiser Sheni. Ha b'gvulin, but if he was outside of Yerushalayim, he would also get Malkus for eating the Meiser Sheni outside of Yerushalayim. Ha b'gvulin like a shalosh. But that's even before it entered into Yerushalayim. Even though it didn't enter into Yerushalayim, you see, for eating it outside, you're chayiv. Says the Gemara, no, it's talking about the Eilei v'apke, where it was brought in, this fig was brought in and then taken out. And that's why you're chayiv. If it was taken out, you're chayiv also for eating Meiser Sheni outside of Yerushalayim. Says the Gemara, if that's so, that it was taken in and then taken out, what's the chiddush? So here the Gemara it says a very interesting chiddush. Here the Gemara says a very interesting chiddush. Hacha b'mayaskinan, kegain da'ailinu b'tivlayu. What happened over here is Marshall brought this fig in before he separated the Meiser Sheni. So therefore, I might say, don't say it's considered the Meiser Sheni went in, because when he brought the fig in, he didn't designate the Meiser Sheni yet. Says the Gemara, Hacha b'mayaskinan, and here I did the daf twice last night, 4:30 and 5:30, because Marshall demanded that I should do it twice, and he didn't come either of the times. Says the Gemara,
it's a lav shein b'maisa, okay.
You're so un-okay that it's astounding. Says the Gemara, Kegain da'ailinu b'tivlayu. It's talking about where Marshall brought the fig in before separating the Meiser Sheni. So maybe that's not considered that it entered into Yerushalayim because it wasn't separated yet. It wasn't designated yet. But the Kesaver Matana Shaloi Hormu, that gifts, even when they're not removed, Kamisha Madamian. In this area, it's as if it was removed. Says the Gemara, are you meaning to tell me that Rabbi Yaisi holds Matana Shaloi Hormu, Kamisha Madamian? The Kesaver Rabbi Yaisi Matana Shaloi Hormu, Kamisha Madamian can't be. Because we're going to see that it's Beis Shammai that holds that Matana Shaloi Hormu, Kamisha Madamian. Beis Hillel, who we always paskin like, Beis Shammai b'makom Beis Hillel lesa, holds Matana Shaloi Hormu are not considered like they are removed. V'tani Reb Shimon Yehuda Mishim Reb Yaisi lo nechlaku Beis Shammai Beis Hillel al perish shaloi nigmur malachtan. Beis Shammai Beis Hillel don't argue about produce that wasn't ripened. V'avru b'Yerushalayim, and passed through Yerushalayim, sheyipoda meiser sheni shalahem, you could still redeem them outside, even though once it passes through Yerushalayim, it's kol to mechitzas, and then you can't redeem it anymore. But everybody agrees that if it passes through Yerushalayim before it ripened, that doesn't count. You could redeem it outside. What do they argue? Where the fruit were completed. In other words, they ripened. Now the question is, if you'd say so then it would be considered that it was already in Yerushalayim, and then you wouldn't be able to redeem it outside of Yerushalayim. You have to return it back the way it is. You can't redeem it anymore because kol to mechitzas. And Beis Hillel says, you could redeem it and eat it anywhere. Why? Because when it passed through Yerushalayim, it wasn't designated yet. And Beis Hillel holds matana shaloi hormu, since they weren't separated, Kamisha Loyor Medamian. And therefore the mechitzas don't lock it in that you shouldn't be able to redeem it. So how could Rabbi Yossi say not like Beis Hillel? If it is as if it was removed, then it was locked in by the mechitzas and you wouldn't be able to redeem it outside of Yerushalayim. So Rabbah makes a distinction, interesting distinction. The din of not eating Meiser Sheni outside of Yerushalayim is a din d'oraisa. And since that's a din d'oraisa, we say that once it goes in, we say matanas shaloi humu kami shahur medamian, since it's a biblical law. Amar Rabba mechitza lechol d'oraisa. So therefore, since it's a biblical law, we're machmir and say that even though we didn't designate it, once it goes in, then if you take it out, you're going to be over eating it outside in mechitzas. Mechitza likloi, the din that once it's brought into Yerushalayim, you can't redeem it anymore, that's only d'Rabbanan. Mechitza likloi, d'Rabbanan. V'chi goes to Rabbanan, that's only when it was already separated. Ki isei be'enei, when it was separated. But Tivle, before it was separated, like goes to Rabbanan, the Rabbanan didn't decree. So that's why Beis Hillel says, if before it was separated, it was brought in and then taken out, you're allowed to redeem it. Ravina says we don't have to do any of this fancy footwork. You asked us a question that if it's talking about a case where Marshal the Hoodlum brings it in where he brings it in and then he takes it out, that we're saying that if he eats it, he's going to get an extra malchus. If he brought it in and then he took it out, what's the chiddush? Says the Gemara, the chiddush is where Marshal was standing inside Yerushalayim with a stick, and in back of the stick, outside of Yerushalayim, was the Ma'aser Shein. If you remember, we had a question, is that considered as if it's in Yerushalayim? And the Gemara there said, take it. Here, the Gemara is saying that Rav Yossi is saying in such a case, it's considered as if it's, since Marshal is in Yerushalayim, what's on his stick outside is also considered like it's in Yerushalayim, and therefore if you eat it outside, you're going to be chayiv malchus. As the Gemara says, Ravina Amar Kegoyin Denoket Lebetanya, it's talking about where he's holding it in a stick, and he's inside, and the stick is outside. V'tiv should buy the Rav Papa, and this would resolve the question of Rav Papa, that according to Rav Yossi, it's considered like it was inside, and then if he eats it outside, somebody is not muted. Okay, now I guess whoever it is. If he eats it outside, then he's going to get malchus. Now, we continue. We continue with the enumeration of the items where you get malchus, and it's really amazing that Marshal is still standing after we've been beating him to pieces. Barely standing. You could see the effects of it. You could see it on his face. Before I start the new Mishnah, I want to welcome in everybody, Dr. Guy, Dr. Udell, Dov Solkowitz, Yitzi Fuchs, Baruch Ian, Irving Fishbaum, Ruven Pollack, Saba, Shelley Zeitlin, Yaakov Warman, Mo Kushner, what's his name? Richazan, Chaim Lerner, Yisrael Fisher, Barry Cement, Rabbi Kranz, Mark Frankel, Gedalia Engel. Gedalia, it's good to have you back. Nachman Chapler, Menachem Imansky, Daniel Rosenberg, Stephen Holtzman, Yeshua Shmuel Eisenberg, Avram Rozepkowitz, Abe Arbach. We're still missing a lot of people. Aaron Sway told me he won't be here tonight. He ditched us for his Navi share, but he'll be listening to us later. And we're missing A.B. Spry, and we're missing a lot of people. But anyway, Danny Vogel, where are you, Danny Vogel? So anyway, says the Gemara, the Mishnah, Hakoirei karcha b'roishai. If, we don't want to wish this on Marshall, if Chatzkel makes a bald spot on his head, tearing out here in grief over the loss of a person, over the loss somebody died, V'amakiv pas roishai, if somebody rounds the corners of his head and cuts off his payas, v'amashchis pa'asiknai, if somebody destroys the roots of his beard, v'asoret tzrita achas al hameis, if he cuts himself over the dead, chayiv. Sorat tzrita achas al chamisha mesim, if he makes one cut but he says that he's doing it over 5 dead people, or he makes 5 cuts over 1 dead person, chayiv al kolachas v'achas. So this is that if he makes one cut, but it's for 5 dead people, he's chayiv 5 malchus. Or if he makes 5 cuts over one person, he's chayiv 5 malchus. Al roish tayim, for cutting off his payas, he's chayiv a separate malchus for each side, so he would be chayiv 2 malchus. Achas mikan v'achas mikan. Except for Marshall only has one side, but most people have 2 sides. So, oh, look at that. He does have 2 sides. Okay.
He says, Rabbi, he's
yeah. Yeah.
Turn the other cheek, Barry.
Ala zokein, for a beard, for destroying the roots of the beard, he's chayiv 5 malchus. Shtay mikan v'shtay mikan. For the upper jaw and the lower jaw on each side, that's 4, and v'achas milmat, 1 for the chin. Rebbe Eliezer, if he shaves them off with a razor all at the same time, if he cuts it with a razor which goes deep to the root, Rebbe Eliezer, not just a razor, even if he pulls it with a tweezer, or cuts it with a planing instrument, he would be chayiv. Now we'll see what the machlokes is about that tomorrow. We won't get up to understand that machlokes tonight. But now the Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, you can't see it now, but I am celebrating tonight. I actually am having Pepsi. I'm just celebrating that the island is here. I don't need too much of a reason to celebrate. Yeah.
What an excuse.
Next, I'll take a Frankfurter.
That's what I had for dinner.
Bourbon. Okay, you sell them even though me and Marshall are here. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. By the way, I have regards for everybody from Les. I spoke to Les today. Les sends everybody. Les sends everybody regards.
What about Mark?
I'm still trying to get Mark to join us. I ate out with Mark in Florida, together with Mati and Country Yossi, and I'm trying to get him to rejoin us. He's living now in Baltimore. He moved from Staten Island. We need somebody to reach out to him. We really do. Shelley, do you know Mark Rosenblum? You do know him, but you just don't remember him. Irving, you knew him, right? Irving, maybe you could reach out to him?
Reach out and touch.
I don't have his number.
I'll get you his number. Okay. So anyway, Tan Rabbanan, Lo Yikruchu, you shouldn't make a bald spot. Yochel afilu kerach arba v'chamesh krichos, I might think that even if you make 4 or 5 bald spots, lo yei chayev ela achas, you should only be chayev 1 malchus. Talmud leimer karcha, if Marshall makes 5 bald spots, lechayev al kol karcha v'karcha, to be mechayev him for each bald spot. In other words, whack him 5 times. Now, the Gemara is going to ask, did we give him 5 hasras or only 1 hasra? If it's only 1 hasra, why should we whack him 5 times? So the Gemara is going to talk about it.
Just because they can, that's why.
Well, the question is, why don't we give you 10? Now, Beroisham, it says on the head. Now, Matam Leimer, where else is the bald spot going to be? So the Gemara says, Lefi Shenemar, it says elsewhere, Loisis Gaidadu, you shouldn't make cuts, V'loisis Simu Karcha Beinei Nechem Lemeis, and you shouldn't make a bald spot between your eyes. I might think that it's only the area on the scalp parallel to the eyes. Menayin l'rabas kol harosh, the entire head. Tamaleima b'rosham l'rabas kol harosh. Now, it says b'rosham by Kohanim. V'yein li'elek b'Kohanim, because Kohanim have extra mitzvahs. They have all the mitzvahs of the Kuna. Sheriba ben hakos mitzvahs Yisraelis. Yisrael menayin. How do we know that by Yid also he's chayav for making a bald spot at any place on the head? Nema kan karcha, it says over here karcha, v'nema lahalan karcha, and it says by Yisrael karcha. Excuse me, nema kan karcha, it says by Yisrael karcha, v'nema lahalan karcha, and it says by Kohanim karcha. Ma lahalan chayav al kol karcha v'karcha, v'chayav al rosh kebeinu anayim, you're chayav for each bald spot, and you're chayav on the whole head. Like opposite the eyes, afkan chayav al kol karcha v'karcha, v'chayav al rosh kebeinu anayim. Uma lahalan. By Yisrael. Al-Meis, it's only if you pull out the hair over the dead, not because the stock market crashed. Afkan al-Meis. Here also, it's only over the dead. So now we said that if Marshall pulls his hair out 4 or 5 times, he's chayav 5 malchus. Hey chidami. If he did it one after another, and with 5 warnings, of course, that's another portion. Pshita. Of course we whack him 5 times. If he did it with 10 asras, we'd whack him 10 times. And we would do it cheerfully. Says the Gemara, and with Shalom Fogel welcoming us, we'll turn the page. We turn the page in honor of Shalom Fogel. Chaf Amid Beis, Shalom. Ella, what's it talking about? The Qad Asra, where we gave Marshall only 1 warning, and he pulled out his hair 5 times. Says the Gemara, Mi Mechayv, would he get 5 malchus? But Tanan Nazir Shoy Shoyse Yain Kol Hayom. If Marshall was a Nazir and he drinks wine the whole day, Ein Chayv El Achas, he only gets 1 malchus. Amalei Al Tishta Vu Shoyse, if we keep on giving him warnings, Chayv Al Kol Achas V'Achas. So how could it be? If we gave him 5 warnings, so then it's obvious. If we gave him only 1 warning, how could it be chayav 5 malchus? Says the Gemara, what Marshall did. Marshall, you have to know, when it comes to evil, Marshall is a great multitasker. Comes to evil. So what Marshall did is he smeared depilatory removes hair. He smeared depilatory on 5 fingers. And we warned him, Marshall, don't do it. And he put all 5 fingers on his head. There he's going to be chayav 5 malchus. Let's see inside. Like tzricha. Well, look at that sophisticated phone that Ruvain has. I don't know. I wouldn't believe it if I didn't see it.
Even if it's 1 pull?
Even if it's 1 pull. Says the Gemara, Loit tzricha, the sach chamesh etzba oisav nosha, he smeared on 5 fingers depilatory, v'osvinu b'bas achas, and put it at 1 time on his head, dahavi le'asra l'chol chada v'chada, it's asra for each one, and we whack him 5 times.
So that goes against Rabbi Eliezer.
What?
Because Rabbi Eliezer says, nitlu kulan ka'achas in uchayva ela achas. He goes against that. In the Mishnah.
Yeah, no, he argues in the Mishnah.
Okay.
When he gets to the markets, it's 39?
39, well, we evaluate if he's able to take 5 times 39, but Marshall's a strong guy. We'll whack him, you know.
I can handle it.
We'll whack him 190 times.
A couple miles of bourbon, you can do it 10 times more.
Yeah, Mitz Hashem. Now, that's before we hang you.
Bourbon or the whacking.
That's before we hang you. Now, whenever I say hang you, Eddie gets such a smile on his face. I'm telling you, it's unbelievable.
Devil incarnate.
Now, become a shear karcha. What's the shear of a bald spot? How big does the bald spot be to give him malchus? It has to be, now the Ritva has one shot in the Ritva is that we should be able to see from distance the flesh of his scalp. Rabbi Yochanan Mishim Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Kigris, the size of a split bean. Kitanoi, so machlokes tanoim, kama shir karcha, what's the share of a bald spot? Kigris, the share of a split bean. Acherim ayim kadeshi yira miraisha, that we could see from a distance a bald area on his scalp. I'm Rabbi Yehuda bar Chaviva, pligba tlasa tanoi. There's actually a three-way machlokes. Chadama b'kigris. One says kigris, the share of a split bean. The chadama kadeshi yira miraisha, you could see his exposed scalp, a piece of his exposed scalp. V'chadama kishtei cyrus, 2 hairs. V'ikadamapik shtei cyrus, some take out 2 hairs. U'ma'ayil b'kadosha, it's a share of a lentil. V'simonech, that is 1 share of a split bean and 1 share of a lentil. Ba'eres kigris, u'michya b'kadosha, these are 2 types of leprosy. And since it says gris and kadosha, it's a reminder that there's an opinion of a split bean and an opinion of a lentil. And by the way, I just want to tell the Olam, as we move over here at a very rapid clip, tonight after the shir, we did the Mishnah Yomis already, we will do a chak. We haven't done a chak in a while. There will be a chak tonight.
Rabbi, the key point is that it has to be seen, correct?
According to that pshat in the Ritva.
Because if it's on top, in other words, it has to be on the front.
No, it could be big enough that you could see it from the top if the guy's short.
Oh.
Now,
You're not going to know if there's 2 hairs or cut, that you can't tell.
no, but if the person pulled out 2 hairs, we see 2 hairs, then he's chayiv. The Edom see 2 hairs. Believe me, the Edom are watching Marshall like a hawk. Now,
They got the stain for me.
They don't have it for me, Marshall.
no, they beheaded you already. Tana. Tana. We went into the Brisa. Hanoitel maloi piazug b'Shabbos. If somebody cuts, there's a Isser, one of the 39 malachas is shearing. And if you cut the fullness of a scissor, b'Shabbos, you're chayiv, if you did it b'shogeg, you're chayiv to bring a chatas. Kama maloi piazug. What is the tip of a scissor? How much is that? Rabbi Yehuda shtayim. Says Gemara, what do you mean? Isn't shtayim only the shear for a bald spot? Vatanya lekarcha shtayim, which implies that for Shabbos that's not the shear. Ema v'chein lekarcha shtayim. The shear for Shabbos is 2 hairs, and the shear for a bald spot is also 2 hairs. Tanya namayachi, hanoitel meloi pi azug b'Shabbos. If you take the tip of a scissor on Shabbos, the din is Yechayev Achatis, V'kama Malay Piazug. What's a scissor? The tip of the scissor, Shtayim. Rabbi Eliezer Aimer Achas. Rabbi Eliezer disagrees. Rabbi Eliezer says Yechayev, even if you cut, Yechayev, even if you cut, Yechayev, even if you cut 1 hair. But the Chacham is moided to Rabbi Eliezer that it's significant. If you're want to look like you have black hair and you cut out 1 white hair because it doesn't look nice, that's a significant cut. That if you tweeze out the white hairs from the black hairs, you chayiv. And this matter of cutting out the white hairs, afilu b'chela, so that's prohibited even during the week because it's considered a feminine activity. A man should not wear the clothing of a woman. That's why we don't dye our hair. Jewish men don't dye their hair, although it would be nice to have a black beard. We don't dye our hair because that's considered a feminine activity.
Blackbeard was a pirate, wasn't he?
Yeah, your cousin. Now, v'amakiv pa'as reishai, and you don't remember, Rabbi said, but Marshall used to come with a patch on 1 eye until I discouraged him. V'amakiv pa'as reishai, one who rounds the corner of his head. The head is considered like two parts. The top of the head is considered like separate from the rest of the head, and that's why the two payas are considered as corners on the extremities of the head. Now, Tan Rabbanan Pa'as Roishai Soif Roishai, it's at the extremities of the head. Ve'ezo Soif Roishai, what does it mean? Ze'amashnet Sdav Lachrei Oizen Ulepadachtai. This is one who equalizes his temple all around his forehead and to behind his ears. So cutting off all the hair below is rounding off the head. That is considered a negative prohibition. Now, if somebody does it to Marshall, who gets Malchus? The barber or Marshall? So says the Gemara, Tani Tana Kamid Rav Chisda Echad HaMakif ve'Echad HaNikif Loike. Both the one that does it to Marshall, Barry who did it to Marshall, and Marshall who had his payas cut, get flogged. Now the Gemara doesn't understand. Why should Marshall get flogged? It's a lav shem b'maisa. He didn't do anything. And look at him. He looks like such an innocent devil. What did I do? And we know that Barry is going to get whacked. But so the Gemara says, Amalei, man de'ochel tamrei be'arbila lucky. If somebody eats dates out of a sieve, should he get malchus? No, it's on Shabbos. If you ate dates that are in a sieve, what did you do? You didn't pull them out of the ground. So here, what did Marshall do? Little innocent Marshall. What did he do? Says the Gemara, the Amalach Mani, who says that Marshall will be chayiv? Rabbi Yehudi, the Amalav Shem B'Maisa like it alav, that he's chayiv even though he didn't do an action. Says the Gemara, you know what? We don't want to learn this is only going according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rava Amar b'makif la'atzmai. It's where Marshall, you think Marshall spends money on a barber? He looks in a mirror and he shaves himself. But it's telling us that if he shaves himself, he's chayiv two malchus. One for cutting the payas, and one for having his payas cut on his head. So we whack him twice.
Save a buck.
What? Right? Save a buck and get, 78 lashes. That's what I call a dumb cup.
That's a pretty good price per lash. That's a good deal.
So says the Gemara, that's one shot. V'divrei Akol. Rav Ashi says no. Barry gave him the haircut, but Marshall helped him by moving his head into the direction. And since he's helping him, it's considered like he also gets in the action, and therefore v'divrei Akol, it's going even according to those that say that you don't get malchus for a lav shem b'maisa. Now, you see what Marshall said. Next time I'll ask Mark to give me the haircut. The only thing is that Mark will just cut off your head. He's not going to cut the payas. But anyway, v'amashchis pa'as zekonoi, one who destroys the roots of the beard. Tan Rabbanan pa'as zekonoi. Here it's talking about soif zekonoi. One of the roots of the beard is at the chin. Ve'ezau soif zekonoi. What does it mean at the end of the beard? Shiboilei zekonoi. One who doesn't have a lot of hair. It grows like a stalk right by his chin. That's the area of the root of the chin.
When we say you're pulling out by the root, is that meaning that it's never going to grow back?
No. It means it's a deep enough cut.
Okay.
Now, v'amisorei tzrita achas, one who makes a single cut. Tan Rabbanan v'seret. It says a cut. Yachal afilu seret al beisei shenafel. I might think even if somebody makes a cut because his house collapsed, or val svintoi shetava b'yam, or his boat drowned at the sea, or the stock market crashed. Talmud Leimer Lanefesh, only a seret lanefesh, only a cut over the dead. Ein a chayev el ala meis bilvad. Now, how do we know that he's chayev for every cut a separate malchus? So the pasuk could have just said loy sisratu. The fact that it says v'seret, it's Talmud Leimer, says the Gemara, v'seret l'chayev al kol srito srita, to be mechayev him for every cut. Rabbi Yossi, I remember minayin l'mesaret srita achas al chomesh mesim. How do we know if we make one cut over 5 dead people, shu chayev al kol achas v'achas, even though it's one cut, since it was over 5 people, he's chayev 5 malchus. Talmud Leimer lanefesh, l'chayev al kol nefesh v'nefesh. Says Gemara, but we learned lanefesh to teach us that you're chayev only if you're doing it over the dead and not over the stock market. That you're not chayiv if you do it over a house collapsing or a boat drowning at sea. Kasavar Rabbi Yossi srito gedida achasi, srita and loisiskaidu, you shouldn't cut, is one and the same thing. Viksiv hasam, and it says over there by loisiskaidu lemeis. So we already know that it's only for the mace. Why does it say the nefesh over here? To tell you that you're chayiv on each and every nefesh. Okay, Rabbi say we will now conclude this enjoyable evening of whacking Marshall, and we of course, Marshall, you know we do it only lishma for you to have kapara, and
only made us feel any better. Okay.
And now we're going to do the chak. Which we haven't done in a while, so we thank Hashem that we're able to do it.